Welcome back, everyone, to Season 3, Episode 25 of the Inside the Woods podcast, Valley News show where every week we've been giving you an inside look at Dartmouth Big Green athletics. I'm your host, Mike Coughlin, and this week we're sticking with the champs of the ECAC, the men's hockey team.
Tim Busconi will have one, and he scores! Tim Busconi and Dartmouth, kings of the ECAC!
That's how it sounded on ESPN Plus when Tim Busconi buried the OT winner against Princeton on Saturday for a 2-1 win in Lake Placid, New York, clinching the first ECAC championship in program history for the Big Green. The nation's leading scorer, Hayden Stavroff, also scored in the matchup, and goalie Emmett Crotto, who's been on fire since the ECAC tournament started, made 25 saves. The Big Green got to Saturday's final after exercising ECAC semifinals demons of the past, shutting out Clarkson, who beat them in last year's semifinal 4-0 on Friday. Now, with an ECAC title under its belt, Dartmouth gears up for its first NCAA Division I Men's Hockey Championship Tournament appearance since 1980. The Big Green battles Wisconsin in Thursday's regional semifinal at the DCU Center in Worcester, Mass. So, who better to talk to than the man who's been the voice of Badgers hockey on the radio for more than 2 decades, Brian Posick. In addition to our interview with Brian, we'll take a quick look inside the numbers at Thursday's contest. So, with introductions out of the way, let's get to our interview with Brian. Here joining me on the show is the longtime radio voice for Wisconsin men's hockey, Brian Posick. Hi, Brian. Thanks for coming on the show.
Hi, Mike. Happy to do it. Hope you're doing well.
So, the Badgers have had an up-and-down season, starting 14-2-2, had a 6-game losing streak in January, closed the regular season 6-2, but then fell to Ohio State in the quarters of the Big Ten tournament. What is your sense of the feeling around the program right now, getting the at-large bid to the tournament, despite the conference tournament loss?
Yeah, well, certainly excited. This is the second time in 3 years that the Badgers have been to the tournament under Mike Hastings, but only the 5th time they've been to the Big Dance since the last Frozen Four appearance in 2010. So it's been few and far between for a storied program. They're also confident, I think, is accurate, despite the humbling loss at home in front of a very nice crowd against Ohio State a couple of weeks ago. The players to a man know they came out flat, didn't do the things they needed to do to compete against a Buckeyes team that was playing for its season, and so anxious to redeem themselves, so to speak, and get into the tournament. And as you know, it's a 4-game run. If you're fortunate enough to get past one, you keep going. Otherwise, things end. So I do think that they're certainly excited and confident, because when this team has played very well, and it's beaten some very good teams, but at times it has not played well, and we saw that against Ohio State.
Right, and kind of leading into that, could you give our audience an idea of what makes the Badgers so dangerous when things are going well for them and they're playing well, but also on the flip side, when things aren't going as great? What are some things that kind of sticks out to you, or, things that kind of trips them up?
Sure. Well, I think the team speed is one thing that this team is, it's one of its strengths, and puck possession. Mike Hastings, who's known as a defensive-oriented coach, has always said the best way to play defense is to have the puck. And when Wisconsin's been at its best, it's controlled play, starting with face-offs, and then from every zone, getting the puck out quickly up through the neutral zone, and then controlling play in the offensive zone. This is a team that averages about 35 shots on goal per game, almost 4 goals per game. So puck possession and speed have been the strengths of this team, and it's led by their top-line center, Gavin Morrissey, who's averaging a point per game. They have a senior in Christian Fitzgerald, and then junior in Quinn Finley, a New York Islanders draft choice. Both have 15 goals. That's the top line for the Badgers. When things haven't been going well, they find themselves in precarious positions, making errant passes, miscues, turnovers that have cost them, and the goaltending at times has left something to be desired. Daniel Hauser, a freshman who came from the Western Hockey League, got off to a fantastic start, But since January 15th, he has a save percentage of about .874. He's only got a 5-5 record in that span, and he's been pulled a few times too because of his play in between the pipes. So when the Badgers were rolling, they had the puck a lot. They used their team speed, and Hauser was good. And conversely, when things haven't gone well, especially in that 6-game losing streak, the puck possession wasn't there, and the big saves weren't there either. I should mention, too, Mike, that during that 6-game losing streak, Wisconsin played without Morrissey and without its second-line center, Vasily Zilinov. So I do believe that played a factor, because when you take two men, your top two centers, out of the middle of your offense, defense, whatever the case may be, that certainly can have an adverse effect on things. And we saw that against Michigan State in that losing streak, Penn State, Minnesota as well. And then they come back, and all of a sudden they start playing better, clicking better, and doing the things that they do well.
Right, and, I also wanted to ask, I know you talked a little bit about, the Badgers having, confidence, going into the game. If you had any sense from, a feeling from the fan base regarding Thursday's game and the draw the Badgers got in the tournament, despite Dartmouth's MPI ranking at 6 and the season they've had, detractors can point to their strength of schedule. It's ranked 43rd. Do you think the fan base looks at this as a good draw, or do you think there are some nerves among the Badger faithful about playing Dartmouth?
I think a little of both, right? I do believe that most of the fans believe this was a good draw. It was here or Loveland. And would you like to be matched up in the first round against Denver, a known powerhouse, or a Dartmouth that hadn't been to the NCAA tournament in 46 years? I think you would take the latter, certainly. But that, if you talk to the coaches or the players, there is absolutely no way they're looking over the big green. As we've talked about, this is a program that is, traditionally been a powerhouse, except over the last 15 years. To not win a national tournament game in that span it boggles the minds of many. So yes, I think the fans believe that this was a good draw, because if things work out against Dartmouth, it's either UConn or Michigan State. Michigan State's a team they swept on the road in East Lansing back in November when they were playing at their best. But I think the fans are anxious, nervous, and I think that I'm trying to put this properly, nicely. It's almost like Cubs fans before they won the World Series. What could go wrong will go wrong. And so I think there's a feeling amongst some of the fans, too, that, okay, we can play Dartmouth. We should be able to beat Dartmouth, but I could see us losing to Dartmouth, and then the complaining will continue.
Right. And, we talked a little bit, about it, but, what do you think will be the biggest difference in deciding the winner of Thursday's tilt? And I know you mentioned, some members of the top line for the Badgers, but, are there some other names Dartmouth fans should know of who might prove to be X factors for Wisconsin?
Sure. And I look at the back end. Their captain, Ben Dexheimer, first team all-conference. He's a very gifted puck-moving defenseman, a young man that runs the number one power play. And Luke Osborne, who made the all-freshman team, he's a kid that can really make things happen in the back end. He's a very gifted skater, very agile, deceptive, and can make things happen offensively. Back to the goaltending, I think ultimately that's what it comes down to. If you look at these two teams on paper and you try to figure out who has the strength in what certain area, you would have to give Dartmouth the edge as far as goaltending. I mean, Emmett Crotto has been so good all season long and very impressive in the ECAC tournament, as you know. I watched those last two games because, working at Wisconsin, covering this team, the Badgers needed Dartmouth or make sure Princeton and Clarkson didn't get through to the NCAA tournament. So I had a chance to watch both of those games, and he's such a large young man. He lets the puck hit him. He doesn't get out of position. So I think it's first off goaltending, and then secondly, I think it comes down to special teams. While Dartmouth's power play is not the greatest, Wisconsin has the 7th best in the country. We know how good Dartmouth's penalty kill has been. The Badgers, not. That's been an issue. So for Wisconsin to avoid having problems on the penalty kill stay out of the penalty box. So that's what I think ultimately, Mike, it comes down to, the goaltending and the special teams. And isn't that the way it always is at this time of the year?
Right, and as we sit here, a little over 24 hours until puck drop, I'd like to ask, if you had any prediction for Thursday's contest, and if you had any particular way you see the game playing out.
How about this? I'll predict Michigan State to beat UConn, and then Wisconsin and Dartmouth are a toss-up. I am so terrible at making predictions for games. I'd like to think that Wisconsin can beat Dartmouth, but I'm sure Reed Cashman and his boys are thinking the same thing, that they can beat the Badgers. Personally, I think it'll be a tight game. I'm even preparing for overtime, getting in between period intermission interviews ready, just in case we go an extra session. I think it's going to be tight. I'm anxious what a thrill for the Big Green, for the community, for the school, for the fan base, to be in this position after such a long drought. And I can only imagine the excitement that they'll be playing with. But I think the Badgers feel the same way. They have something to prove here, Mike. That all right, with Mike, when they hired him 3 years ago, everybody was all in. He had so much success at Minnesota State and prior to that in the USHL. They want this program back on track and contending for a national championship, and the players feel that way too. So, but again, back to your question. I'm terrible at predictions, but I'll say it'll be a tight game, and if it goes to overtime, I wouldn't be surprised.
All right, and then, finally, before we let you go, I wanted to ask if you could give our audience some insight on what it's been like to call Badgers hockey over the years and how entertaining it is to be able to call big games like the one coming up on Thursday.
Well, it's been a blast. This is my 24th year on the radio, and prior to that, I worked for Wisconsin Public Television and called games for 5 or 6 years. So I've seen some of the best players come through this school, through this program, from the Danny Heatleys to the Blake Jeffrions to the Cole Caulfield. And Cole just scored his 44th and 45th goals of the year last night for Montreal in their win over Carolina. Fortunate to be able to call Wisconsin's last national championship in 2006. Had a blast going to Ford Field in 2010, even though Wisconsin fell short against BC in the national title game. But I'm as anxious and as excited, I think, as these young men who are 30 years or 40 years younger than I am. It's the NCAA tournament, and it brings an extra added excitement to calling games, and I'm looking forward to it, and certainly hope that things pan out, because I packed for 5 days. I'd like to use every piece of clothing that I brought in my suitcase.
Right. Well, thank you very much for joining the show, Brian. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome, Mike. And again, I'm excited to watch Dartmouth play in person. Wisconsin's very cognizant of that top line with Stavroff and McDonald and Cleaves, and they know how good Crotto is. So they know their hands will be full, and I'm anxious to see how this all transpires.
All right. Well, thank you very much again, and let's hope for a good game on Thursday.
All right, Mike. Pleasure talking to you.
Before we wrap up the show, let's go inside the numbers on the Big Green Badger battles set for Thursday. Dartmouth, which is number 6 in the MPI, enters Thursday's regional semifinal in Worcester, Mass. On a 4-game winning streak. The Big Green boasts the 9th-ranked scoring offense, scoring over 3.5 goals per game, along with the 4th-ranked scoring defense, allowing just over 2 goals per game. While the Big Green strut into the tournament, the Badgers stumble into it. Wisconsin lost its last game, which took place on March 11th, in the quarterfinals of the Big Ten tournament, falling 7-1 to Ohio State. The Badgers hold the upper hand on the stat sheet in scoring offense, as they are number 7 in the nation in that metric, averaging over 3.5 goals per game as well. Where Dartmouth beats out the Badgers on paper is scoring defense, as Wisconsin is just 39th in that, allowing over 3 goals per game. An X factor for the Big Green could certainly be their junior goaltender Emmett Crotto, who has saved 99 of 102 shots from the first ECAC tournament game against Colgate in the quarterfinals to this past weekend's final. As for the history between these two programs, get this, there is none. This will be the first time ever the Big Green and Badgers battle it out. With a trip to the regional finals on Saturday hanging in the balance, Sure looks like it'll be a good matchup to see who meets the winner of Michigan State and UConn. In the meantime, stay tuned to the Valley News, and specifically its website, vnews.com, for all coverage of the Big Green's trip to the NCAA tournament. And that will put an end to Season 3, Episode 25 of the Inside the Woods podcast. As always, thanks for listening. We'll catch you next time for some more Dartmouth athletics talk.